Welcome everyone to the Dreambuildrs podcast. I am super excited for this upcoming episode because today we have a very special guest that I've been looking forward to talking to for a while. We're going to talk about entrepreneurships, and especially if you ever had like those dreams, ideas, or like thoughts of having ever a product or a service out there that impacts the world, but you never even know where to start, then this might be the right conversation to listen to, because I'm going to talk with Corrie LoGiudice on the Dreambuildrs podcast. So Corrie, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Now, guys, it's good for you to know that Corrie Lo is a fourth generation entrepreneur. She's a business strategist, a coach. She has been on TEDx as well, and she really helps people to become entrepreneurs. So that is really cool, and I'm sure that we're gonna give you some tools today to, start from idea to getting into execution and even landing your first client. So let's talk about it, Corrie. Where shall we start? So we start with your backstory, first of all.
Sure.
Like your kind of inner motivation to get into entrepreneurship, but also I know that you had a huge epiphany moment that we talked about last time.
Sure.
So please tell us.
I'll give you what I joke is the Reader's Digest version, so the short version. So I have a very expensive piece of paper that says I could draw well. So when I went away to university, I got an art degree. So I am a painter by trade. Went to college. I went to the Maryland Institute College of Art, which is a prestigious art university here in the US. And basically graduated without a job. And I was waiting tables, as most artists do. And during this time, this really frustrated my father, because my father was the third generation running my family's business. So with that said, he was like, why don't you, instead of waiting tables, why don't you come work for the family company? We can have you be like a graphic designer. You could do something artsy, but at least then you're not waiting tables and you're working towards like a real job, quote unquote. So I took the job, and basically it feels like I blinked, and 15 years later, I was senior vice president. I was running the entire operation.
Oh, wow.
So the company is a very large electronics distribution company in the US, covers the entire northeastern part of the country. I was responsible for managing 8 distribution locations, multiple different Fortune 200 product lines. Our customers were mom and pop resellers on Main Street that were selling electronics products, and we were a distributor of them. So we were kind of very much the middleman. During that phase, when, I worked my way up through the company, started off as, graphic designer. I built out a marketing department. Eventually sales started reporting to me, operations. But what my family's company does, and does really well, is they teach mom and pop retailers business development so that they can compete with the Fortune 200 brands that they represent. I know it sounds kind of weird to say that they're competing, but truth is they are. People ultimately, especially in this day of the internet, have the option to buy directly from the company, Sony, AudioVox, whoever these electronics manufacturers are, or they could buy from, Bob on Main Street, who has the little electronics shop. So mom and pop retail don't have the same budgets that Fortune 200s do. And this was something that I knew. So back in, I want to say it was like 2008-ish, like very, very early on, I adopted social media marketing. So I started doing social media marketing with our clients. Guerrilla marketing was another big thing that we got involved with, which is basically completely outside of the box. It's not print, it's not television, it's, working events, it's door knocking, it's doing very out there and engaging tactics, right? And I loved what I did. I was really, really good at it, in part due to my creative background. It really allowed me to think outside of the box and think of different ways to market and get people out there. But ultimately, I kind of knew that something didn't feel right. It's like in the back of my head, I was like, okay, well, I'm being groomed to be the fourth generation, running this. And this is what I'm meant to do. I've got, the kid, I've got the house, I've got the white picket fence, I'm running a successful business. So on paper, I had everything I wanted, but I always felt like something was missing. And I was in complete denial about it. And I get to this point where I'm pushing through the denial. I'm going through a very tumultuous divorce. My son was 5 months old. I'm running this big business. I realized that the most I ever get to see my son is through my home security camera system, which is pretty sad.
Wow.
That I was spending that much time in a car. I was commuting the equivalent to a part-time job,
Hmm.
just commuting, never mind my actual profession on top of it. And I kept going until my long-term post-divorce partner took his life by suicide. So that was kind of a huge wake-up call. I remember sitting there on the lawn of his apartment, thinking to myself, like, everything you know today can be gone tomorrow. Like, why are you choosing to live your life this way? You know that there's something more out there for you. Corrie, it's up to you to stop. Like, you got to be there for your son. Nothing's ever a given. So at that point in time, that's when I started making the transition that I decided, you know what, I was taught how to be an entrepreneur. It's in my blood. I'm going to do it myself. I started my own coaching and speaking business at that time. Within a few weeks of starting my business, I had paid clients, which for anybody out there who's starting a coaching business, that's not normal to get them right away.
Yeah.
I was landing them right away. Within 6 months of starting my business, I had a 40,000 person following on social media and my email list and stuff due to my digital media background. And within a year, I landed my TEDx. And now I take this skill set that I've collected over the course of my professional career, and I teach other people how to utilize it to become entrepreneurs themselves, and how to recognize specifically what their talents are, like what they're meant to do, and how to capitalize on it through creating a business. And that's how I'm here today.
Oh, wow, wow, wow. Thanks so much for the introduction, Corey.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking, like, for people who are perhaps now in corporate, and they want to make that jump to entrepreneurship, they want to build that business idea, or they're having these thoughts to make that jump. Like, despite of
Mhm.
all the knowledge that you got along all those years of working in corporate and working in your family business, like, weren't you scared of making that leap?
Yes and no. So truth was, I had been thinking about making that leap for years, but was in complete denial that it was something that I should do. And it's ironic because when I look back on it now, the one who actually suggested I should become a coach was my therapist, um, which is hilarious because we have to believe that we are capable of doing it ourselves. And sometimes other people are the ones that could see it in us before we could see it. And I remember I used to like watch on Netflix, there was that documentary with Tony Robbins, the I Am Not Your Guru.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
had watched that and I'm like, oh my God, he's got the coolest job. And wouldn't it be great to make money doing that? And blah, blah, blah. But I can't do that because I'm meant to, run the family business and be the fourth generation and do this and do that. So when it's so funny the way the universe works. It was maybe like 8 weeks after that moment that my therapist was like, have you ever thought of coaching? You'd be really good at it. You're, helping people navigate, challenges at your corporate job now. You're already doing it. And I'm like, nah, you're crazy. So really the very first step is educating yourself on what's involved, right? So a lot of times too, and it's, I kind of joke, it's entrepreneur imposter syndrome, that because you're not familiar with the industry or you're not familiar with doing it yourself, you automatically feel like everybody around you is going to know you're an imposter before you even get involved, and you kind of psych yourself out. So part of what you have to do is educate yourself what's involved with whatever it is you want to do. If you want to, start a consultancy or start an agency or work as, a trainer in some capacity, depending on what type of business you want to start, you got to learn kind of the 101 version. And then from there, you have to kind of identify, okay, well, what skills do I need to build, and what do I need to do to make myself confident? Because if you're not confident that you could do it, your business is dead before you even get started. So that's the very, very first step.
I I totally recognize that, especially the last part when you say, like, you have to build that confidence within yourself and also that gain that skill set, right? Because I took almost, let's say, I think almost 2 years before I finally made the step from corporate to entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
And I've really been thinking, like, so what do I really need in terms of skills in order to go to entrepreneurship? And that was especially about training and coaching. So I've been immersing myself deeply into personal development as well around that
Sure.
time and in
Mhm.
workshops. So I totally see what you mean. Now,
Mhm.
when you're working with people, what are kind of with clients, what are kind of the typical fears that you see that people are holding them back from really taking action? And building a
Oh, sure.
business?
Without a doubt, by far, the number one fear is fear of failure. People are so afraid of failing that they don't even start. And truth is, and this is coming from the fourth generation entrepreneur, entrepreneurs are professional failures. Literally, we're professional failures. We just keep going and going and going and going until finally something works and we make money.
100%.
So
you have to in the end, right? Otherwise, it's not working out.
You have to. But even when you think of like some of the most, famous, entrepreneurs in history, each and every one of them went through multiple failures. I mean, you think of folks like Henry Ford, his first 3 automobile companies failed, before he started Ford Motor Company. Same thing, Thomas Edison famously did 10,000 prototypes of the light bulb before he had the one that worked.
Yeah.
So the shift that most people need to make when it comes to that is it's not a failure. You learn something, right? It's a necessary step in the learning process to get the ultimate result that you want. So a lot of times, dude, I'm married to a scientist now. So, science is a really interesting process in that you're really just looking at numbers, right? You're looking at numbers, you're looking at data, and really efficient entrepreneurs, they understand that the actions that they're taking towards whatever projects it is that they're doing is just data points. So it's very, very easy to kind of take your emotion out of it, that it's not a failure. It's okay, well, we tried X, it had Y results, so next time we're going to try Z. And that's all it is. And you just recycle and repeat it until you have something that works. And then from there, you just double down on what's working.
100%.
Very simply, that's the best way to go about it.
100%. Now, I know that in your, the framework that you teach, you both kind of mix personal development skills also with business training, right? I think you find that very essential. I think that's also super, super essential, especially when it comes to entrepreneurship. When you look at your own journey, what has been for you the most important kind of mindset shift that you made in order to live your purpose and, build your own dream?
Sure. For me in particular, every person is an individual and different, and they're going to have different blocks. For me, my biggest block was my money mindset. And it's interesting because a lot of people, when they come into money mindset, it comes from a place of lack or growing up without money. For me, it was the opposite. So I came from a very successful family that did very well in business and, didn't want for anything. So my blocks were surrounding, should making money be easy? I would purposely, I would subconsciously self-sabotage myself when I had, that testing and failing, and I had something that finally worked. And if my brain deemed it too easy, I would overcomplicate the process. I'd be like, oh, let's try to make this better by changing this, this, and this. And then I would break it and then I wouldn't make any money. And it's because my brain had difficulty understanding it can be easy and you don't have to be spending 80 hours a week to do it, right? The fact that you're able to create money, in a more effortless manner, it means that your systems are efficient, and that's a result of everything that you've learned, over the years, and you're no longer testing and failing anymore, you're actually doing. So that was my personal biggest block, was all surrounding money mindset, and it's something I still work on to this day.
I think many people have that money mindset block, right? Especially when starting out, because that is something important when you jump into entrepreneurship. Corrie, I would love to know, because this is a topic that we often talk on this podcast, how did you find your purpose?
That's a great question. No, I did it, and I coach on it now. And a lot of the framework that I used to coach was me having to go through and explore and get the result myself. Right. So a big part of it was a lot of personal development. So a lot of reading, a lot of, watching videos, taking classes, journaling was a big part of that for me. Therapy. Again, my therapist was the one that was like, you should be a coach. It's like, whoever would have thought that. But another big thing that I did too that kind of helped with that was I did invest in coaching for myself very early on to help me kind of get what was in my brain out on paper and, look at, okay, well, what opportunities, like what do I have in front of me and how can I use this moving forward, right? Because that's the difference between coaching and therapy. So therapy, you're exploring, okay, well, here's everything that happened in the past that got me to where I am now. Where coaching is, okay, here's everything we have available to us right now, and how are we going to use that moving forward, right? How are we going to create the plan to get to where we need to go? So by investing, and I invested in a variety of different coaches, I invest very heavily in coaching even to this day, but through some of the different processes, and they were for all different reasons. At the time I would pick up little parts of, okay, this process worked well for this process worked well for that. Oh, wow, I could reuse this for specifically this process. That's ultimately how I found what I'm doing today. And the framework I teach, it's very simple. I have a few videos on YouTube that explain how it works. I call it the monetize me method. And basically it's taking the intersection of what did you love to do as a child? And this is important because it's before society's expectations really kind of sunk in, right? So what was the thing that when you're allowed to do whatever the heck it was that you wanted to do as a kid, what was that, right? So taking that, matching that up with your life and work experience to date. So a lot of folks, they're shocked when I tell them that my degree's in fine art. They think I have a business degree, but there's more than one way to get to that result, right? So just because, my 15 years experience as an executive, at a company, that's, business education 101 right there. So that doesn't mean because I didn't pay for my MBA that education is not valuable. So being able to outline all of that on paper and understand too, like I understand at this point that my art background is why I'm so good at doing what I do now, because I can think outside of the box, because I could show people opportunities that they can't see for themselves, because I see things differently. And that's a result of my artistic background and my creative thinking that, I learned and I invested in that education. So laying all of that out, and then also partnering that with what change do you want to see in the world, right? What problem is it that you feel compelled to fix? When you're able to, Venn diagram it and get to the center point of all those three circles, that's what you should be doing.
That's a sweet spot,
everything
right?
you've experienced, well, it's the truth though, because everything you've experienced in life to date has prepared you for what's to come and what you're supposed to do. And that I find has been the most efficient way to kind of map it all out on paper and figure out what that is.
I love that framework because it's not too complicated. It's easy, and then it's also kind of you're using that sweet spot to understand what your purpose is. Now, I would love to talk about, because finding your purpose is great, but finding your purpose and living your purpose, so really starting to do it is something else. So I would love to start with you to talk about building a business and like what the first steps are that people need to think about when they are starting a business, like from the get-go.
Sure. Well, I mean, the very first step, and my programs we walk through, I call it it's kind of like building a structure or a house, right? So my program, the Validate Your Biz Blueprint, follows a blueprint where first we build your foundation. Your foundation is discovering what your purpose is, right? So that whole monetize me method. Also, who is it who's out there who needs what it is that you have to offer, right? So that's your market research, right? It's figuring out who's out there, who's paying for people to solve these problems, identifying what problem it is that you're solving, right? And it's not what do I want to solve, it's what will people pay for to solve it, what do people need to have solved, right? And getting all those details clear, because then from there, that sets the foundation for your business. Then from there, in terms of building the business, that's when you actually start to, build the structure. The way I like to describe it is there's 4 different pillars or 4 walls to build your business. So the very first one is going to be your offers, right? Your pricing, your packaging, how you're going to offer it. If you're not clear on what it is, your purpose is and who you are serving, you're not going to be able to build that wall, right? Yes. So it's absolutely essential. So figuring out that. Then from there, once you have that ironed out, okay, well, then you need to be able to accept payments. You need to be able to keep track of your expenses and your books, and you need to build systems. So many programs when it comes to business, education, they're so focused on marketing. It's like marketing, funnels, lead gen, this and that, which is all great. But if you don't know how you're going to take their credit card when they tell you, yes, they're ready to go before you do it, you're not going to end up landing that client because you're not going to be confident. It's going to really mess up the sales cycle. So I recommend you figure out your systems based on your target client first, right? Because if your target client doesn't like to use Venmo, right, there's no point to making your payment acceptance being Venmo. So you got to like kind of build it for your client, not for you, and build out what those systems look like. From there, the next wall is your marketing. So you do need to be able to get the word out there, have people understand what it is you do, build a brand around it, make connections with people you can help and serve, right? That's all within marketing. And then lastly, once you're making those connections and having those conversations, you have to be able to convert them to a sale, right? So that's very simply, you build in 4 walls. Then from there, scaling is simple. You're either refining all of that, because once you get one sale, you can get more, right? So it's, again, doubling down on, okay, what worked? We tested and failed, tested and failed, tested and failed. Oh, ding, 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 this worked. Do more of that, right? So you're doing that to kind of grow. Or if you want to diversify your streams of income, then from there, it's kind of like adding a level to the building and starting the whole process all over again, right? So what problem am I solving? Who am I serving? What's the pricing of the packaging? You repeat the whole thing again for the next 4 walls and the next roof. And that's the easiest way I found to explain how you go about building a business.
Wow, that's like a whole package, right? If people are listening who are listening now and they think like, that could be quite difficult. And I would love to know from your perspective, because you said, wow, in the beginning of our conversation, you said in a couple of months or weeks time, you already landed a couple of clients, you had a huge following base already. Like, if you really look back, like, what has been the key thing for you to start doing that and to build that out there and really land those
by
clients?
far the key, and this is where I think a lot of people miss out, is all of my tactics were not digital, which I know sounds funny because I built this huge social media audience, but that's not how I was getting my clients. I was getting clients by doing outbound outreach. I'm a very proficient networker, right? So even when I'm teaching people how to build a business now, and really this is important too, I think, because you need to be able to effectively have a conversation with somebody and for it to be very, very clear who you are, what you do, and who you're serving. It's much easier to iron that out in an in-person conversation like you and I are having right now than it is to kind of futz it out through content, right? So a lot of people, they'll just make content and they'll be like, oh, this isn't working, and it's taking years and years and years because they're not clear on any of the above. Where you could attend a networking event and you could try to do an elevator pitch and in like 2 seconds and understand, okay, that did work, that didn't work. Okay, the next person I talk to over here, I'm going to try it differently. And you try a different pitch, right? But it's all within the same chunk of time that you're spending an hour at this networking event, right? So it makes it much, much easier to get all those details clear, plus build up the confidence in talking to people than it does through content. Because ultimately, if you go the content route first, you still have the same exact problem that when you do finally have somebody that raises their hand and says, yes, I'm interested, I want more info and to maybe buy, you still have to talk to them.
Yes.
Right? So if you don't know how to talk to them, you're still not going to sell them. So I'd rather, which is what I did for myself while I was figuring out all those details, because it was still money for me. It's like I knew what I had to offer, but I wasn't sure who I should be offering it to. I mean, when I had first started out, I had done divorce coaching. I had done health and weight loss coaching. I had done business, business just kind of made sense for me. But initially when I had started, I was working with established businesses like those mom and pops, which I was so familiar with. I didn't start working really doubling down on new entrepreneurs until the pandemic, when suddenly there were a lot of people contacting me. How do I start a business? Blah, blah, blah. And I kind of realized that I was very well suited for taking complicated business concepts, I think in part because I don't have a formal MBA, and being able to explain them in a way that it's easy for the average person to understand it, build it, and be confident that they could do it. Yeah. Right. So even with that, for me, there was a lot of testing and failing and trying and, figuring out who that market was. And I was able to see such quick success with it because I was talking to people directly and not relying on content.
I find it so funny that that you said it right now, because so many people are, they're not only thinking about it, but they are starting to execute immediately on digital platforms, right?
Digital, and I find it the funniest thing too, because so many times I'll be talking to somebody, I'm like, okay, well, what did you do to start your business? Well, I got my website. I'm like, all right, well, if you have no traffic to drive to your website and you're not sure what you're offering or what your pricing is or how you're going to take the payment, then why do you have the website?
Exactly.
And it's one of my mentors had described it, and I love the way he puts it. He calls it creative avoidance, that there are actions that you feel like you're moving towards whatever it is your ultimate goal is, that it feels kind of like you have a business because you have a logo or because you picked your brand color or because your website's up, but it doesn't serve any actual purpose to generating leads and actual sales for your company yet. Because you really don't have a business until you have a first sale.
100%.
It's a very expensive hobby.
Yeah, very expensive. All the time that you dedicate into it.
Right.
So Corrie, so you say, let's say, instead of going digital, let's have kind of traditional conversations, one-on-one conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is there a certain, I wouldn't say like a script that you have, but like, what are you telling people in those conversations when you're talking about your coaching program or your coaching business in order to get clients hooked? Is there a certain strategy that you follow, or are you just having a very authentic conversation?
No, it's very strategic. Very strategic. And that's part of, what I teach within the programs too. So networking, and a lot of folks too here, this is actually a good thing though, because a lot of folks, they go into networking because they're like, I hate social media, right? They're like, I hate social media, so I'm going to do networking. And you still have to be able to effectively communicate and talk to people, but majority of people who network with zero strategy. So just the fact that if you even show up with half a strategy, you're going to be positioned so much better than anybody else at the meeting because no one else is paying attention to this stuff. So you're instantly like more desirable to have in the network because you seem like you got your stuff together. So it's really as simple as knowing, everything I had just talked about in the foundation part of your business, who you are, what you do, who you serve, right? Being able to articulate that, and there are certain, ways we do it with positioning statements and stuff like that, where you do a 60-second overview, at a networking event at a diner, and people will know in 30 seconds who you are, what you do, who you serve, and who they should be sending your way. But you also need to have a strategy. Who do you want to be connected to? You have to be very, very direct. Does it sound like you or someone grab my business card so I could send you a link to book a call with me? Or, send me an email to make an introduction. You have to tell people how you want them to take the relationship to the next level. And really anything in business, it's a series of invitations with people, basically opting into the next step, right? So I view it as you're making invitations, you're not like selling, right? So sounds like it would be a good fit. Would you like to book a call to learn what working with me would look like? It kind of takes that sleazy factor out of selling too. Oops, excuse me, sorry. And makes it much, much easier. And also it's more authentic. Like you had said too, that authenticity is very, very important. But you need to have strategy along with the authenticity for it to really work.
100%. And it's so important what you said as well, to articulate like who you are, who you're serving and so on in that 60-second. So I think that's also very important. And now, Corrie, I would love to know, like, what would you be doing in 10 years from now? Are you going to follow a different direction? Or are you like, what's your vision for the future?
My vision ultimately is I really want, my company, Corrie Lo & Co., to be a globally recognized brand for helping motivate the masses to recognize their talents and use them to help and serve others. That's huge for me. So you're probably, and it's actually already in motion. I do keynote speaking and stuff now as well. So going to more of like a general audience in that aspect, and not necessarily only serving like brand new entrepreneurs. Like, yeah, that's what my coaching does. I'm more of like a business coach, but it's not just about that. There's lots of different ways. You know, you have very talented people within companies and organizations that aren't fully leveraging that talent. So how do we do it to help and serve other people? It doesn't necessarily have to be within the entrepreneurial space, but it definitely falls within the business space. And I would like to be a bigger part of that conversation.
Well, I'm very excited to see what you're up to in, in 10 years from now. And who knows, if you're going global, we get to see some partnerships in Portugal or even the Netherlands. So
That'd be great.
let's see what's up. Now, Corrie, before you go, please share with us, you know, what are the best places to find you and your work? I know you have some awesome free trainings out there, so let us know.
I do. Yep.
Yeah.
No, I'd love to connect with you. So you can find me on the web. My website is corrielo.com, CORRIELO.com. And then on all social media platforms, my handle is the same. It's I am Corrie Lo. I have a great free training for anybody who's here. If you want to learn how to go from your idea to landing your very first paying client, and doing so just the way we talked about on the show today, without a website, without content, without paid ads. You could go to corrielo.com/free class. And I've got a free 60-minute training that walks you through the entire blueprint, the Validate Your Biz Blueprint, and shows you exactly how we do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Corrie. Well, thank you for having this conversation, for coming on, for sharing all the insights about entrepreneurship, and also for sharing your personal journey. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm looking forward to see you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, see you.